Progress.
Join us this entire season for presentations on anniversaries, beginnings, milestones, and memories throughout our collections. First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor Elmer L. Anderson and Eleanor Anderson in honor of former library director, Dr. Edward B. Stanford. The presentations are based on materials in the University Library's archives and special collections. A special thank you to Alan and Jason from Middle English Interpreting, who will be providing ASL interpretation for today's presentation. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And please use that Q&A function and not the chat function so that we can keep track of your questions and make sure they are not lost. You can submit your questions at any time, but we will hold them until the end of the presentation as time allows. And then another reminder that today's presentation will also be posted later on the University of Minnesota Library's YouTube channel. So you should be able to access it within the next few weeks. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the people on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relationships with our tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institutions provide support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for our American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. And I encourage you all to learn more. So today's presentation is the Curlin collection. From portable portfolios to digital dives, let's celebrate the past 20 years. Presented by Mary Schultz, Curlin board member, and Lisa von Drasek, curator of the Curlin collection of children's literature. The Curlin collection holds rare books, manuscripts, and original art of many renowned children's books writers and illustrators. Join us as we explore how the curators, friends of the Curlin, interns, and volunteers contribute their expertise, passion, and energy, providing access to these treasures for students, researchers, teachers, and other institutions over the decades. So take it away, Mary.
Anyway, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to share with you all of these slides from the Curlin collection. Carr Nelson Hoyle, the first curator of the children's literature collections, shared that in 1974-75 was the beginning of celebrating 25 years anniversary. At that time, there was a yearning for more community participation in the Curlin venture. An anniversary committee was named, and they had 3 proposals: the Curlin Friends, the Curlin Award, and the Curlin Newsletter. The individuals who became part of the Curlin Friends had unique gifts and were connected with other organizations. Friends brought friends to their collection for events, and the group expanded. School librarian Marilyn Hobbs became the first Curlin Friends president. I was invited to become a Curlin friend and board member by my friend Verla Clausten. I began taking part in events, visiting with authors, editors, and illustrators whom I had previously known only on the pages of books. On First Fridays, while balancing lunch on my knees, stories about contested spaces within the contents of the caverns awed me and amazed me. All of this was great, and it was a one-sided only friendship. As a St. Paul teacher working with students who are deaf and hard of hearing, and as an adjunct faculty working with graduate students here at the university, children's literature was a common thread that inspired student learning. Whether I was preparing to talk with preschoolers or graduate students, going to Walter Library to research children's literature had a huge impact on me. This is a picture here on the right of the Upson Room. This drawing was made by Karen Ritz, an artist and volunteer with the Curlin. Arn Nelson Hoyle shared with me that the Upson room in Walter Library was regal, but staff found it challenging to carry on all those Curlin activities. Competing needs necessitated juggling. A visiting scholar might have to move to the curator's desk when a class arrived. Typewriters used for cataloging books proved noisy nuisance to the researchers, and processing incoming books on the large tables stopped whenever there was an event. Materials were moved to carts and later replaced on tables. Yes, now we are here at the Elmer Anderson Library, and we have all this new space. Soon after I came here, I became a volunteer on the third floor in the fishbowl, working with the John Borger comic collection. I was assisting processing the comics that would be then archived. It was then that I began a two-way relationship and a two-way friendship. On this slide, 30-some years have ensued since the founding of the Curlin Friends, and there's increasing numbers of participants and activities involving the Curlin growth with national and international recognition. Here, co-presidents Steve Palmquist and Julie Reimer wrote in the newsletter, "With school back in session, thoughts turn again to books and how to use them in the classroom. We hope educators and other book lovers will engage readers with materials from the Curlin collection through the use of portfolios which have been developed." This focus on community engagement included amazing portable portfolios which educators could rent. The portfolios were designed by Curlin staff and volunteers. I want to share one of the many portable portfolios. Here we see one which was shipped in a sturdy 12 by 15 container. They kind of look like what you would ship films or something like that. The book here is Park's Quest by Catherine Patterson. Catherine is pictured here when she was first received the Curlin Award in 1983. And the other picture is when she was the second National Ambassador for Young People's Literature in 2010. This portfolio embraces three objectives that continue to be front and center when engaging with student researchers. It was amazing that students and teachers who were using these materials could read these cards, read these facsimiles, see all the drafts, and really get a strong feel. The three objectives that we see here are objectives that we would use today. Give children the opportunity to grow, to get to know an author's written work in manuscript form, to provide visual evidence of the author's persistence in rewriting and editing to provide a better book, and to challenge students to excel in their own research and writing efforts. Notice this first draft with an editor's note. This is exactly what the objectives was getting at. Catherine Patterson, in all her amazing writing, is being challenged by her editor to make this paragraph clear and more easily understood by the reader. And the editor says that it was, she just couldn't get it straightened out. And if you read what's circled at the bottom, it says, it is confusing. 3 handsome men in uniform, not police, but pilots, perhaps, yes, airmen. It goes on and on. It wasn't straightened out. So Catherine kept the integrity of the chapter and she changed the text. This is truly providing evidence of the author's persistence in rewriting. These mailed and rented portable portfolios were used well over the years, and we have now added to them with more digital opportunities. Here we see Jean Stevenson, past president of the Curlin and a volunteer, preparing a digital resource based on over 15 authors' drafts. This project is called First Pages and is not yet complete, but surely will enhance teachers and students wherever they may be. Here we see Jean, who has come from Duluth, working in the Wallen Research Center. In 2017, as I began my volunteering, I became part of a project that shows readers of picture books the process that illustrators go through. Our team of volunteers created a resource describing children's book art and how it is made, with examples from over 60 artists that are held right here in the Curlin. With guidance from the Curlin curator, this was an amazing volunteer project. In her introduction, Lisa von Drasek, our curator, wrote, "The University of Minnesota Library's mission is to share these riches with teachers of children, youth services librarians, teachers of teachers, and students of creative writing and art, and anyone who is interested in the craft of making children's books. I believe in the value of integrated art observing and art making across the disciplines. This exhibit is a jumping off place, just the beginning of our explorations." This project was a learning experience for those of us doing the project, but also volunteers brought expertise in the areas of art techniques, various media and art, children's literature, computer skills, graphic design skills, diversity, and access. On the left here, we see a book by Dan Yaccarino, I Am Story. This was a digital book. We saw all the way from the rough dummy to the polished dummy to where he is using the blackest of black ink to create his final digital. Bob Barner, in the center here, wrote Ants Rule, the long and short of it. In this paper collage, Barner used colored, painted, and decorated papers from all over the world. They were torn and cut into shapes. Nancy Carlson, from here in the Twin Cities, wrote Loudmouth George and the Sixth Grade Bully. She used the technique of drawing, and this was in colored pencil. E.B. Lewis was the illustrator for Far Away Home, written by Jan Kurtz. His approach is one of fine arts, and he added a comment that said that it's like a dance. Susan Kuklin is a photographer who works mostly in nonfiction, and actually she's an author and photographer, and she says, "This has given me a front row seat at the fascinating, infuriating, complicated, and mysterious theater called life." Next, we have Oink by Arthur Geyser, one of my favorites. And in printmaking, he uses an illustration. He uses in his illustrations a 500-year-old technique of copper plate etching. And finally, we have Before Morning by Joyce Sidman. This was illustrated by Beth Cromas. What you see here is a scratch board. And the more she scratched, the brighter it got. She wanted to have a little bit more color in it. So after she did the scratch board, then she used watercolors to give it a very nice, quiet color palette. Volunteers doing children's book art techniques in media could not have done this without a huge amount of research. And that was done by volunteers in the 2000s. We want to thank the many volunteers, including two that are seen here, Dr. David Beyer and Linda Borger, but also Nancy Larson and Sarah Morin. Another volunteer is Jim Iyer. He worked with digitizing this so that we could use it more easily. Darlis Nelson is shown here in this picture selling cards at the Chase lecture. The cards that we sold were original artwork done by illustrators who are in the Curlin. The Chase lecture honors the memory of Naomi Chase, a beloved professor who inspired generations of students and teachers to appreciate the transformative role of literature in young people's lives. Actually, the community engagement that we did with the College of Education and Human Development and the Red Balloon Workshop includes both Book Week and the Chase Lecture. This year, David Wiesner will be giving the Chase Lecture. He's a 3-time Caldecott medalist. This will be on April 5th at Anderson Hall. Another longstanding community engagement event is the Minnesota Children's Book Festival in Red Wing. Each September, we have a booth at the festival along with facsimiles of noted Curlin materials and shared with authors whose exhibits we hold, whose work we hold. Here also you see the Curlin exhibit, which is set up in the display cases in the Anderson Center. Red Wing draws families from all the communities around, taking part in hands-on activities. Here, children are working on writing their own maps, menus, and recipes as part of the Curlin-sponsored tables. Curlin Friends have had a working relationship for 30 years with the Hub Center, the conference put on by the University of St. Thomas. Here we see Nikki Grimes and Brian Collier, who were the speakers just before the pandemic. We get to meet many people when we come to places such as Chase or the Book Week or the Hub Center. This is oftentimes where we meet many people who become Curlin Friends, volunteers, and student workers. Rain Taxi launched the Twin Cities Book Festival in 2001 as a way to support readers, writers, and publishers and booksellers. The engagement with the children's literature is huge, and the presence of the University of Minnesota libraries is as well. During the pandemic, for the past 2 years, the Curlin Award has been part of the online Twin Cities Book Festival and has allowed us to continue for 46 years. Here we have the 2019 Curlin Award winners, Lois Ehlert and Claudia Mills. On the right is U of M student Michaela Higgs, putting up a huge bulletin board in Pike Hall for the Curlin Award. Ruth Berman, a Curlin friend, edited this book, The Curlin Awards in Children's Literature, 1975 to 2001. The book contains photos, commentary, and a short bio of each recipient. Karen Nelson Hoyle wrote the introduction, and Betty Peltola, the history of the Curlin. Karen shared with me that staff and Curlin friends and volunteers were delighted with the proposed new library for special collections and archives. She said, "We perused the architect's plans, visited the site while wearing our hard hats on numerous occasions, and imagined what the facilities would look like and offer. There would be a designated CLRC office space, processing area, temperature-controlled caverns for the stored treasures, shared lecture hall, and gallery." And Donald C. Kelsey, who was the University of Minnesota Library's facilities planner and consultant on the new construction, he was responsible for the move and hiring students who worked on weekends. The units were responsible for creating location charts, shelf by shelf, for both Walter Library and the new Anderson Library. The ABC of it, a 3-floor exhibit, opened in May 2019. Lana Miller worked on the nitty-gritty aspects of this exhibit from the very beginning. As a docent at the exhibit, she reflected, "In 3.5 months, I have given tours to dozens of people. Some were strangers and some were friends, but all were deeply interested in the subject and the stories that I told them about the items that were exhibited. Many felt personal connections to the specific books. On one occasion, I was able to lead a group of visitor experience volunteers from MIA. As a MIA volunteer, I'm still encountering people who remark how much they enjoyed the tour." Verla Clausen, Curlin Friends board member and docent said, "It was intriguing and informative watching the process for designing this display in meticulous detail." And Gretchen Ronka, the 2022 president of the Curlin Friends, said, "The intricate details of the exhibit fascinated the visitors. We shared observations, reflected on the Marcus text, and delved deeply and civilly into the issues raised by the Think About It panels." Also in 2019, Lance Brockman, scenic designer and scholar and university professor emeritus who volunteers with The Gathering, brought about 20 people to come and view the ABC of it. The Gathering is a group that is a respite program that provides brain stimulating activities and social engagement to adults experiencing early to mid-stage memory loss. We collaborated with other units from Elmer Anderson with a hands-on program. For over 30 years, Curlin Friends have selected items from the Curlin collection to be displayed in conjunction with the Children's Theater Company. They installed the work in exhibit cases located for a while in the lobby and now in the first floor of the Children's Theater. The Curlin Collection newsletter notes that Irvi Gilbertson and her daughter Brenda created the displays from the winter of 92 through 94. Norma Gaffron then continued the work to the public involving the Curlin Friends, and Chris Dyrud assisted. In her article published in the Curlin Summer newsletter, Norma wrote, "From the Curlin collection, we select various editions of the book. Being dramatized. Then these volunteers search their attics and cellars for artifacts, and even local businesses donated or loaned them if needed. Jane Nicolo became responsible for those displays when others were out of town." We see that what Norma was talking about. The ski equipment was borrowed from families and from the John Rose Oval. The tree, the pickle jar, and all that came from people's basements. Some of our volunteers and interns are just starting out in their careers. They bring visions and dreams and greatly inspire me. Here, Payal Doshi, Curlin friend and volunteer, has gone on and is now an acclaimed debut author with her new book, Rhea and the Blood of the Nectar, published in 2021. It's a fantasy taking place in Darjeeling, India. We have had a partnership with the Minneapolis College of Art and Design for at least 30 years. Here's one of the outstanding MCAD students, Sumei Vu. The skills she brought to the Curlin based on her years of studying art and at the MCAD, and also her drive and focus were amazing. She was able to do amazing research setting up Cinderella and Circus Abyssinia. Suzanne Zander is a volunteer at the Curlin and is also a docent at MIA. She is a perfect match. And here we have Something Happened in Our Town. This is what is going to be opening tonight at the Children's Theater. And that exhibit will be put up later today. And then, of course, it was March 2020. What can we say? The staff and students began to work at home to be safe during these times. The CLRC team took up their laptops, headphones, and Zoom connections in small apartments, houses on kitchen tables, porch sofas, and home offices, and out on their decks. We see here a picture that's taken from Facebook. It says Operation Read Aloud. And there are 1,800 members. Operation Read Aloud was allowing authors, illustrators to read their work, to have other people read their work as well, with the blessings of the publishers. During the pandemic, this was an amazing opportunity. We have over 600 books in this program. So then we combined Operation Read Aloud with our MCAD students and a book, Writing Boxes by Lisa von Drasek. One of our students from MCAD, Danielle Hill, gained great confidence in her internship experience. And she said that in her reflection. Working through these weeks has given me confidence that I lacked before starting. Alana Grippa Osland reflected on how she discovered the research process being a big part of illustration. Both of these students' artwork serves as a springboard for young artists wanting to respond to what they are reading. In closing, I send thanks to all of our past and present Curlin friends and volunteers, interns and student workers, and I heartily welcome new friends to be added to this team. It truly is a two-way friendship in lifelong learning. Now we'll hear from Lisa.
Okay. Well, Mary, thank you so much. Mary will stop sharing her screen, and I will continue by sharing my screen. Let's see if this works. Technology is our friend. Yay, we did it. Okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you for your service to the Curlin and the research that you did for your part of this first Friday lecture. So the Curlin. Let's see if this works here. Oh, good. I am often asked, let me see if I can get more of my screen. Good. I am often asked, what is my favorite thing in the collection? Would it be the dummy of Amelia Bedelia? That was my first acquisition, and I hand carried it from Fritz's widow to the Curlin collection. But what about the original art and manuscripts of Wanda Gogg's Millions of Cats? But good night, Moon. Look at, oh. But wait, what about the manuscripts from Walter Dean Myers and Lisa Yee and Nikki Grimes? Maurice Sendak, A Hole is to Dig. And then there are the rare objects like the little fur family in pristine condition that we can display and hand to children and students. James Marshall's original journals and notebooks are in the Curlin collection. And one of my favorite read-alouds is I Stink by Kate McMullen and Jim McMullen. And to see the thumbnail sketches in color. Melissa Sweet. This is a piece from Melissa Sweet's Balloons Over Broadway. But wait, did you know that the Curlin had the original field notebooks of Jean Craighead George? And we have the work of Christopher Paul Curtis, the manuscript pages from Bud Not Buddy and Watson's Go to Birmingham. And I bet if you asked Caitlin Marino, our assistant curator, she would say my favorite piece in the collection is the first page of the first draft of Because of Winn-Dixie. And if you ask Kate which of her books is her favorite, she would say it's like choosing amongst your children. And so I will not choose, but I will tell you what the work of the archives is and special collections. We collect stuff, we describe stuff, we preserve stuff, and we house stuff. And that equals accessible stuff. And in case you're wondering, stuff is the academic term used for materials held in the collection. And it is the job of the curator to select materials that 50 years in the future will be of interest to students and scholars. So I'm looking right here. When I found Eric Carl's illustrations in the book, The Sun is a Star by Sune Engelbretson, you can do that research and you can find out that Sune Engelbretson was the director of the Museum of Natural History in New York City. And Eric Carl was hired to make his vision, his words, sing, and he does. So I was thinking about, how does a bill become a law? How does this collected stuff come into our collection? And what do we do with it? So we collect stuff. And Lois Ehlert called us up. Now, Cara Nelson Hoyle, the previous curator, planted the seed, and we held some of Lois Ehlert's work. But the majority of her work, her process work, her dummies, her original art were held in her very small one-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Lois called on a Thursday, and she said, Lisa, I was making an estate plan, but I realized I don't want to wait till I'm gone. I want you to have these materials now, and I'm moving. Can you come to Milwaukee this weekend? And of course I said, yes, I will come to Milwaukee. And I came to Milwaukee with Paul von Drasek. We rented a van and we packed up Lois's apartment of books and art and manuscripts and research. And Mr. von Drasek carried it and loaded the car while I ate bonbons. And we drove 5 hours and 2 minutes back to the Anderson Library, where Jeremiah, our department assistant, met us on a Sunday afternoon to keep the stuff safe in our garage, ready for processing. And this is what that looks like, arriving at Anderson Library. And then we describe stuff and we preserve stuff. And this is Caitlin Marino, our assistant curator. And here she is describing stuff and processing stuff. And here's Jeremiah doing the same. No one does this work alone. And as Mary said, as a volunteer, we have volunteers, we have interns, we train people to process the materials so that we don't have stuff that's inaccessible. This is Kate Dietrich. We don't do it all alone here. Kate is also a processing archivist in central processing. And here she is explaining to Andrea Davis Pinckney how these oversized materials will need a box made for them. And the preservation staff creates these custom enclosures to safely store and protect the archival materials. And then it goes into the cavern with its consistent temperature and humidity, perfect for paper. But what is access? We are open access. Anyone can come and ask for materials and hold them in their hands and see art and manuscripts up close. They could just go online. Again, we've created access through our finding aids. And you know that there are 64 flat boxes of art for the Lois Ehlert collection. And then you can go to the Maxine Houghton Wallen Special Collections Research Center. There it is. And we have your materials ready for you in the reading room. We also have classes. We have classes in art and picture book making and children's literature and science and biology and design and graphic design and independent studies, because children's literature informs everything we do at the University of Minnesota. And I teach about comics and banned books and about picture book making and the history of children's books. But I also teach young children, first graders, middle schoolers, and grown-ups. And this is the leadership team from Learner Publishing. And we often have groups coming to see the materials held in our collection that informs their own professional practice. And this would be Candace Fleming, writer, looking at other writers' work to see their process. And then we often partner with classroom teachers. This is a student in biology who, for her final project, described and made a picture book on photosynthesis through the lens of someone in India. And when I got here, I was so enthralled with everything in the collection. And as I began teaching, I realized we need to make these materials accessible to teachers and librarians all over the world. And so we do have exhibits about the making of a picture book, and that would be Balloons Over Broadway. about the history of children's books. That would be the ABC of it. Children's book art, 3 centuries of Red Riding Hood from the Jack Zipes collection, and the making of picture books through pre-separated art. And we have exhibits and special events. And Andrea Davis Pinckney was the 2014 Mayhill Arbuthnot lecture. You can go online and hear that lecture today. Just Google 2014 Mayhill Arbuthnot or Andrea Davis Pinckney, and you bring it right up. And these exhibits don't happen by magic. We have Darren Terpstra, who in his vision translates everything we want to say in a physical exhibit. And we have a director who supports the work of the Curlin collection. And so that we can physically come to the Anderson Library and be surrounded by the art. But there's one thing I forgot to say. Advocate. We advocate for our collections. Now, you had already heard about the Upson Room at the Walter Library, but did you know there was a battle for the Upson Room, the beautiful Upson Room where the children's literature research collections housed and taught and shared for 25 years in keeping with the wishes of the family that created this Upson Room, that it be a celebration of the spirit of intellectual curiosity and discovery. Children's books, of course. And sorry for the terrible image. So there were special events and researchers that came. Norma Gaffron, one of our founding friends, said, I was introduced to the Curlin collection from the College of Education. Dr. Odlin encouraged me to bring my students. So she was a teacher bringing her students to see these rare and precious materials. She continued working on her degree, and the Upson Room and the Curlin became her home. And then we need that music. Dun, dun, dun. The Children's Literature Research Collections was evicted from the Walter Library, Upson Room, and all of the materials were boxed up and sent to the 4th floor of the Walter Library because an administrator said that this room was being underutilized. And what they wanted to use the room for was faculty receptions. And you better believe it that Karen Nelson Hoyle didn't go, shrug her shoulders and say, okay, not at all. She rallied the troops, the Curlin friends, the authors, the illustrators, Ned Stanford. I could see these are handwritten notes, obviously from some kind of meeting that said underutilized. 107 master degrees papers came out of here in the last 20 years, 7 doctoral dissertations, not underutilized. And they called in the troops and begged them to write to the president to revoke this development, that this whole sorry mess is an embarrassment, and that the university better rescind this ill-advised action forthwith. Don't you love that language? So this was in 1992. And Karen Nelson Hoyle is being interviewed by the Pioneer Press and the Minnesota Daily. And she's saying, I'm concerned about moving this collection, that not only about the collection itself, but we're damaging future relationships with children's book collections and authors and illustrators. And then another article, 1992, home again for the children's book collection. It may return. They didn't let up the pressure. But after a few weeks of protest by a group called the Friends of the Curlin Collection, Shaughnessy relented. Tuesday, he announced that the collection would be completely returned to its former home. And then Ned Stanford writes a note that today's good news is that at the end of March, the collection and staff are slated to return to the Upson Room. It was the Curlin friends, the donors' family, and many others that gave the enterprise support when it most needed it. For this, I thank you personally and know that the curator feels deeply grateful to you. Which brings us to the Elmer L. Anderson Library. It was years in the making. It was not an easy, oh, let's build this building. Let's dig this cavern. Rudolph Macaulay, historian, spent his life preserving the chronicles of the American migrant experience. He was at the forefront of the drive to create the Elmer L. Anderson Library to house these disparate collections that were all over campus. Mary already mentioned that Karen was deeply within this process, and we have files and files of blueprints to show that our space here at the Anderson Library is perfectly suited to the variety of new needs and community engagement. And then finally in 2000, it opened, and the children's literature collections and rare books and the Babbage Institute and Manuscripts Division and University Archives and Immigration History Research Center and the YMCA and social welfare collections came together in one fabulous building. And just this morning, coincidentally, I had a phone call with Corey Manash, who was a student worker here in the late 90s. And I asked him, you know, what was that experience like? And he said, Karen made a connection with everyone who came through the Walter Library to the Curlin collection. And what it taught him was that the archives were grounded in the entire library system and as the Curlin was, and how many people it touched. And it also told him what the Curlin meant to the university community at large. So none of this happens without tireless advocacy of the staff, of the friends, of the Curlin friends, the library friends, and the university and library's leadership. This is a picture of Karen Nelson Hoyle from over 50 years ago. The Curlin collection is now raising money for an endowed chair fund. And this is for our future, for the next 50 years. Take a moment now. We're going to see a 3.5-minute film of the chairs of the Curlin collection campaign. Hi, I'm Lisa von Drasek, and I'm the curator of the Curlin collection of children's literature, one of the leading archives of books, art, manuscripts, and correspondence in the United States. Join Kate DiCamillo, John Cheska, and Andrea Davis Pinkney and find out how you can help endow the Curlin Collection Chair.
The Curlin Collection, amazing. There's nothing else like it. It is thousands of pieces of children's book history in one spot.
When you walk into the Curlin, you peel back the curtain on the creative life of authors and illustrators. You get to see how the sausage is made on your favorite children's books. And you come to understand how they do it.
Children's literature, children's books. This is one of the first ways that we as human beings learn how to connect. And all of the material and love and passion and hard work that goes into making those books is on display at the Curlin.
I love seeing a draft by somebody else. To go see Kate DiCamillo's Winn-Dixie and see how she sweated over that. It's like, I can always make fun of her for that. But now, unfortunately, she can do the same thing with me because I gave all my stuff to the Curlin.
It doesn't matter if you have a PhD. It doesn't matter if you're like, working at Starbucks and you want to write a children's book. You can come to this collection. And that's part of why I give too, because it is open access.
Through technology and the digital work that Lisa von Drasek, the curator at the Curlin, has created, I can be in Brooklyn, New York, visiting the Curlin, and my friend or relative can be in Botswana visiting the Curlin?
I think the coolest thing I saw at the Curlin was probably just the Curlin itself.
You think of an archive as stuffy, old, dusty. And the minute I walked in, I saw vibrancy, I saw excitement, and it totally changed my perspective on what an archive is.
Here's why everyone should give money to the Curlin for an endowed chair. We need a children's book expert in the Curlin. We need a librarian beyond a librarian. We need somebody who can be a teacher, somebody who can be the curator, somebody who can be a connector.
It is something that needs to be preserved, not only for people who want to make art, but for society.
Supporting an endowed chair for the Curlin really is a guarantee for the future. It guarantees that there will always be an expert curator, that there will always be someone there to cultivate the collection. It guarantees the future of children's literature and its impact.
We're waiting for Mary to come up. There you are.
Yeah. Thanks so much to Lisa and Mary. Lisa, I did not know that I was going to be in your presentation. Thanks for showing the absolute village that it takes to deal with archives and special collections. We have about 10 minutes, so we have time to answer some questions. If you have a question, feel free to pop it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get to all of the questions. So let's start with the first question, which is, why is the Curlin collection called the Curlin collection? Is it named for someone in particular? And if so, why?
Yeah, that would be a whole nother First Friday. Dr. Kirlin was a collector of children's books, manuscripts, and original art. He lived in Washington, D.C., and he was an alum of the University of Minnesota. And he worked for the FDA. And for those of you of a certain age, you can understand how important his work was. He was part of the team that banned thalidomide in the United States. And so he loved children's books. He loved children's book art. If you look in the ABC of it, and that's a digital online, you'll have a history of Dr. Curlin and his work. And he gave his entire collection of books and materials to the University of Minnesota. And so that's why it's the Curlin collection. And so that's the Curlin.
Right. Our next question is, could you repeat the information on David Wiesner's talk? Has
Mary.
that been revealed yet?
Yes.
Yes, that has been put out, but David Wiesner will be coming here at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 5th. And it's interesting, not in Anderson Center, not in Anderson Library, but at Anderson Hall, which is on the West Bank also. He'll be at Anderson Hall at 6:30 to give his presentation. And you can register online. That will be a wonderful presentation.
All right. What does one need to do to volunteer at the Curlin collection?
Well, Mary's official title here is not only part-time worker bee, but she is the coordinator of our volunteers and interns. Mary, would you like to speak to that?
Well, if you want to volunteer, just call us and make an appointment, come in and have an interview, and we'll talk about what you bring to the Curlin. It could be someone who's retired, as we had some of those people, or someone who's very young and wanting to get involved. We would have a conversation and try to get a match for you.
Great. Our next question, I don't know if we even know the answer to this. How much has been given to date to the Endowed Curlin Fund?
I don't have that answer. Mark Engebretson might still be on if he might have the answer. Maybe by the last minute he can come back with some numbers.
Well, if he's here, We'll wait. We'll go on to the next question. Are there collections similar to the Curlin in other states?
Why, yes, there are. Second only to the Curlin collection. It's in a peer-reviewed journal, so I know that's right. The DeGrumman collection at the University of Southern Mississippi is a magnificent collection that holds not only the original art and manuscripts for Curious George, but also the Ezra Jack Keats collection. So if you wanted to look at the original art for a snowy day, you need to go to Mississippi.
All right. There's no more questions. If you have a question, feel free to pop it in while I answer or ask a question that I have for Lisa, okay, which is, what do you want to do for your next exhibit?
I actually am not at liberty to say.
Ooh, oh, that's exciting, though.
Because we will be working with other collections around the country. The Arnie Nixon Center, the Dodd, the Eric Carle, that's maybe the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation. I can't say a word.
All right.
Mum's the word. But our next digital exhibit, we hope to complete the first pages, because how cool would it be to see the first page of the first draft of Because of Winn-Dixie, the fourth draft, the 10th draft, the editorial conversation, and then the finished first page from the book. And then you could see the whole process. So authors like Jane Yolen, and so, the ones we've been talking about, we have their manuscripts. How cool. So anyway, we're very excited about that for a digital manuscript, for a digital collection. But yeah, our next, probably don't see an exhibit from us until 2025, 6 in there.
And by the way, Caitlin just noted that the registration for David Wiesner is in the chat.
Thank you, Caitlin. And yes, there is a really cool audio interview from the University Archives. They just did a presentation on audio, and there's one with Dr. Curlin, and you can hear him speaking about the collection.
All right, we've got 2 more questions real quick. The video, is that available to see online? The one for the endowment, you want to pop the URL into the chat?
I can't right now.
Maybe Caitlin can. I believe Caitlin, it is just curlin.lib.umn.edu.
Oh, the curlin.umn.edu.
All
there
right.
we go. And if you Google the Curlin UMN, you should come with the direct link, and it's on the front page.
All right. And then one final question.
There you go. Thank you, Caitlin. Oh my God.
All right. How do you approach an author to ask them to contribute their works to the Curlin?
Super subtle. Hi, I'm Lisa von Drasek. I'm the curator of the Curlin collection. Are you familiar with the Curlin collection? Oh, you are? That's great. Have you placed your papers with an institution yet? You haven't? Let's talk. I try not to be too aggressive, especially at conferences. I really don't want people crossing the street when they see me coming. But our best advocates are actually the people whose materials are already here, like Barbara McClintock telling other authors and illustrators, or Andrea Davis Pinkney saying, my stuff's at the Curlin, and let me tell you what Lisa does there, and let me tell you what the volunteers. And I'd say that the best news we have for anyone is that we are open access, and we're here to share these materials. Our job isn't to preserve them and put them in the cavern and never look at them again. Our job is to get out the word that this is available to anyone who wants to. A Girl Scout troop has come, and the Hiawatha Leadership Academy comes, and that's the joy. I mean, somebody did ask me, what's the best part of your job? And I said, teaching from the materials in the collection. And she said, you teach? And I said, why, yes. So, but that's sharing the treasures, I think, is the great joy.
I definitely have to say your infectious love for your job is contagious. All right. Well, thank you so much to Lisa and Mary. And it was wonderful hearing from you all. Thanks for attending today. And reminder that you'll be able to see this presentation on the library's YouTube channel in a few weeks. Join us online again on April 1st. We have 2 presentations. One is Electronic Evolution, the Brave New World of Born Digital Archives at the University of Minnesota Libraries by our digital records archivist, Laura Friedman Shedlove, and Due Credit, Celebrating People Behind the Scenes at the Bell Library, presented by Maggie Ragnow, Curator, and Ann Good, Assistant Curator with the James Ford Bell Library. Thanks so much, and we hope to see you next month.